I crumbled, quite honestly. From a physical perspective, I lost 10 pounds. My hair, I was losing my hair. It was coming out in clumps in the shower. And my mental health was declining because I was failing.
Hello and welcome to Growing Through It, your go-to podcast for real leadership stories. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. In every episode, you'll hear straight talk from leaders who face their own challenges. We'll dive into those whoops moments and the insights that followed. This podcast is about the lessons that refine us, shared to help you confidently lead in your own style. Whether you're looking to steer your team towards success or just seeking a spark of inspiration, you're in the right place. Let's grow through it together. Stacy, welcome to the Growing Through It podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a minute since we've caught up, and I'm glad we're doing it here. But introduce yourself for the audience.
Yeah, it has been a really long time. So my name's Stacy Vega. I'm a director of strategic planning and governance for a really large health insurance company. I'm a mom of two boys. I say two boys, but they are 24 and soon to be 31. So they are grown men. But I am a dog mom to Nugget. And Nugget she'll be 4 in November. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Wait, where is Nugget? Because last time we talked, she was in your lap. Did she let you go for this one?
No, she's literally right here in her dog bed, right beside my desk. So,
well, I'm glad Nugget is protecting you. It's always good to know because she's how much does she weigh?
If you see Nugget's pictures, she looks like a small lap dog. Nugget is 37 pounds.
She does look like, when I saw her last time on Zoom, she looked like she was a lap dog, but 37 pounds is no lap dog.
No, but she still is. I still carry her like a baby. It's the husky. She's got husky in her. So that's where she gets the bigness, but she's very short. She's got really short legs. So she looks like a husky corgi.
Oh, that's an interesting mix. I didn't see the full body last time. So I could talk about dogs all day, but we won't. Let's talk about your first leadership experience because it was pretty much a dumpster fire. Well, why don't you tell me? First of all, let me ask you another question. How long have you been leading in a formal leadership role?
In a formal leadership role since 2017. Before that, I had informal leadership roles. I had interns and rotational associates, like students or young professionals that just graduated from college that came and did rotations in different departments. So 2014.
Okay.
So,
all right. So when you're taking us back to this first formal leadership experience, I guess it was back in 2017. Is that fair?
I think so.
Okay. All right. I'll shut up now. Take us back, Stacy.
Yeah. So my very first formal leadership role, I will preface it with I was just super excited that they even asked me to take on this role. My official boss had left. She went to another department within the company, and I had been with her the longest, and they stepped up and said, do you want to take this role? It was a little daunting because the people that I would be leading had many more years of experience than I did. Probably a good decade on my experience, technically, not leadership level, but from a technical skill set, they had a lot more experience than I did. So that
were they your peers? Like, were they originally your peers, or were you moving to a new team? Or
they were my peers.
That's always lovely. Before you go into the story, I'm glad you set this up, that how you got into the leadership role. Did you have any hesitation, or were you like, no, hell yeah, like this is it?
I was hell yeah. Leadership, more money, more visibility, and a chance to do what I really was passionate about, which was brand strategy. The other side of me was I had a total imposter syndrome because I needed to be able to lead these individuals that I would also be learning a ton from and earning their respect and their trust.
Well, I'm glad you admitted the money and visibility, because I don't think people talk about that enough. And not all leadership roles pay well or more, but oftentimes it's a big bump up. And it's a legit incentive to have visibility and money, and then the ability to do some of the work you wanted. So thank you for being honest about that.
Absolutely. I can't be anything but transparent. I think it shifts those in your career. Like sometimes in my career, the title was more important, but not the money. Sometimes the money was more important, not the title. And then oftentimes the work was more important and nothing else. So I think depending on where you're at, it shifts. For me, it was definitely, I needed some more money.
Yes. Good point about, it does change over your career.
So you took this, you had some hesitation, you had some imposter syndrome, but you were like,
let's do this now. Leading your peers.
Yes.
Go on.
And there were a few HR issues when I took on the role. There were a couple of things. So I had some HR issues already existing on the team. I had a new person that had just started a few months ago that was being put under me. This particular person had no marketing experience, but she had the things that I admire in folks, which is she had determination, she had grit, she was resourceful. Like I'm big on people being resourceful. And so I had to not only onboard her and teach her the fundamentals of marketing so that she could effectively do what we had hired her to do. I also had to up my emotional intelligence IQ really quickly with those HR issues, navigate these folks reporting to me, but not necessarily trusting my leadership or my skill set, and coach them as well. So not only building their trust, but I had coaching issues that I still had to deal with. Ultimately, those two people ended up going out on medical leave and then ultimately quitting. So I was now left with one person and I had work to do that required a 4-person team.
So did you know about the HR issues before you decided to be in that leadership role, before you accepted the position?
I knew that there were some issues. To the extent of what was going on, I had no idea.
So how soon into your role did you start unpacking the issues? Was it like day one, or did it take a while to kind of bubble up to the surface?
It was week one.
Week one. Both people going on leave, or?
No. So the first person went on leave shortly after I took the role. And the second person, it was probably a couple of months after I took the role. But right when it all came to a head was when we had a ton of work to do. We had the brand strategy and marketing plan was due. We had onboarding for the other person. We were still building out a completely new idea at this place and a framework and structure for this new person's position. And then I had all of the things that I was responsible for doing. We were working on rebranding the organization at the time, and not in a visual sense, but we were shifting our brand promise and what we stood for. And anybody that has ever worked in brand strategy knows that is a ton of work. We were implementing a new enterprise brand measurement, and that really required multiple people to work on it, because you're not just surveying consumers, you are surveying leaders in the organization, employees. You are looking at how we go to market. Like, there was so much that went into this enterprise brand measurement that this new person that I had, the only person who's like my ride or die at this point, she is like, I don't know anything about measurement or marketing, but I'm going to do whatever you need me to do. So between she and I, we kind of carried the load, but it did not come without a lot of struggle.
Okay, so you had this team of 3, 2 were out. You have this new one ride or die employee who has, it sounds like the talents there, but not the fundamentals that you need to teach.
Yeah.
What did you do? Like, do you remember, like, what was your reaction?
I crumbled, quite honestly. From a physical perspective, I lost 10 pounds, which at that point in my life, I didn't need to lose any weight. Right now, I'd probably embrace it. But then, no, I didn't need to lose any weight.
No, you look great. Stop that. But okay, you lost 10 pounds. That's significant.
My hair, I was losing my hair. It was coming out in clumps in the shower. And my mental health was declining because I was failing. So I'll give you an example. From the HR perspective, when you become a new leader, there's a suite of like web-based trainings and in-person trainings that you are supposed to take as a leader. I had not been given any of those at that point. So employment law, none of that stuff. And so I was literally out here winging it, and I was failing miserably.
You got nothing? I'm trying to think if I did either. I don't think I did either, actually. I remember like one about performance that I went to that was required as a good cook, but that's all I remember. But you got nothing.
I got nothing. And there was one. So I'll give you an example. I had to write this person's performance review. So I had just become their leader and I had to write their performance review. But I collaborated with the previous leader and wrote it with them. And she probably wrote 95% of it. But I had to deliver it, and it was not good. That person rebutted it to HR, and we had to have a sit down with HR about the performance review. And I kept saying, I really think this other leader needs to be here because I didn't write this stuff. And I'll tell you how stressed I was during that conversation because this employee was just saying whatever she could to just undermine and demean and discount the process and my leadership. My Apple Watch actually said, your heart rate is higher than normal. It gave me a warning. My Apple Watch has never done that before. So it was incredibly physiologically debilitating for me at that point in my life.
What a shitty situation for you to be in. Was there anything, did you say, hey, former leader, I need you here? And then she declined? Or did you just say, hey, look, did you reach out for support from her?
That was an HR call. They were like, she's not her leader anymore. You need to continue to explicitly state to her, this was from her and that you are just the messenger. They say, don't shoot the messenger. Well,
you got shot.
I got shot.
Funny, not funny. It's funny now, right? When you can look back and go, oh my, but what, really putting you in the worst scenario there, mm-hmm. The worst situation. Yeah. And how did that meeting end? Do you remember? Did you black out and just don't remember anything?
I think I shut down because no response that I was giving was appropriate, acceptable. And I just said, just tell me what you want me to do. It was a huge learning experience. The HR person afterwards reached out and said, basically expressed empathy for the situation that I was put in. But that was the HR side of it. There was the whole the body of work now that I was effectively carrying on my own with my ride or die employee.
So that person, I guess, that situation that you had, that resolved, or it did not resolve, or she went out on leave and then it wasn't an issue anymore. But is that like going in the background to why you have this work? going on?
Yeah, she went out on leave, and then after she quit. I can't remember how long it was, but she ultimately quit. So
Okay, so you've got, is it a blessing at all to have, because I can't imagine that's a productive employee anyway. Like, they don't want to be there. They're not doing well anyway. They had never, I guess, been told. They've never, I don't know what's going on with that situation, but I can't imagine she would be helping the team either. Right?
she was not helping the team. They had, from what I was told, the previous leader did have conversations with this person about their performance and their work, but never documented it. So in the HR world, it doesn't matter until you start documenting it. So I had to start the documentation.
Okay, that is the big, like, leaders, if you're listening, you got to write that stuff down. If you don't write it, it doesn't matter. So don't wait for the big performance review. Tell them, start documenting. Otherwise, you have nothing to lean on. It starts like at zero again.
It does.
All right. So you've got that situation. And then what happens next? Do you just dig in and like work a million hours? Like, how do you get through all of that?
Yeah, it was, that person's strengths. The other person, we'll call her my ride or die employee. She was very good at researching, project managing, scheduling. So I kind of just gave her all of that stuff because, writing the brand strategy plan and the marketing plan, we are working with the creative team. We are working with the marketing strategists. We're working with the business partners, and healthcare and all the other divisions that ultimately have goals to achieve, and pulling all of that together into this 1 to 3 year plan. And the way we, I know a lot of businesses do it differently, but our brand strategy and marketing plan was all inclusive. We had messaging, attributes, all of that stuff was in that plan. So, and who our target audience was, we had to build all of that out. So yes, it was, I say all hands, but it was me and her hands on deck.
It's 4 hands.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And it was still very stressful because I was also having to do my job as well as a leader, and that other person's job too, which was a lot of working with our internal marketing partners on her work. So I had those bodies of work as well. And I, ultimately had a conversation with my leader at that point to tell them that I was extremely stressed and I was having a hard time.
And that's what happened there. Because I was about to say, did you ask for help? Did you say, hey, look, this isn't working. Like, I need support?
I did say I need support because here, let me tell you, because people are like, oh, just hire more people. When you have 2 people on leave, you cannot backfill for their positions. You cannot unless you create 2 new positions. And those are temporary because if those people come back, they get their job back within a certain amount of time. So it wasn't just as easy as hiring more people. I was allowed to go for a contractor, but that didn't come until months and months later. And it was just a contractor role. And so I reached out, what can I do? At that point, it was a conversation of what can be taken off my plate. And, I tried not to lead that conversation emotionally, but I was super emotional then at that point. And I think sometimes, we're like, oh, it's all business. You can't lead with emotion. We are human beings. We are emotional creatures. It is very hard in something that bad to not be emotional. I was crying.
It's the most preposterous thing when people say that. And I think what people mean by that is like the quote unquote acceptable emotions. So they don't want you to cry, but you can be angry, right? Like there's certain emotions that are completely fine, which tend to be masculine emotions. But if you cry, they don't want that. But yeah, people make decisions with emotion all the time. It's not logic. And also when you're so under-resourced, when you're not sleeping, when you're stressed, when you're going through all this, you cannot contain your emotions. It's just not possible. You're so low resourced. So yeah, I hear that. Like I can understand that. So you got told that you could get a contractor, or you got told?
So my leader at the time, and I'm very transparent about, my backstory. I'm very transparent because I think a lot of how I grew up is what has shaped me into the leader that I am today. I my history is, for some, is pretty traumatic. And my leader at that point knew about, how I grew up and, how early I had a child and the things that I had been through. And what I feel like was her way of making it easier on me was, and literally, this is what she said. Oh, you've been through worse things before in your life. You'll figure this out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really not getting help from anywhere.
No. And I felt like that was for her to use what she knew about me personally as a way to justify what I was going through professionally was probably one of the most inappropriate things a leader has ever said to me before.
Were you able to respond, or did you not feel safe doing it? Or did you not feel like you were in the emotional state to say anything?
A lot of times when I get really upset or angry, I just don't say anything. You get the firecracker, I might fuss and I don't really mean it. But when I'm truly, truly just beat down or upset, I just don't respond. And I didn't respond at that point. And I ended the conversation. And then I got off I think we were still in person at the time. I think I went to a conference room and cried.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I just feel your pain. That is,
yeah.
That's just such a tough situation to be in. And what do you remember the time frame between when you started and when you went to your boss to say, hey, I need help? Like, was it a few months, a few weeks? Like, what stage were you in?
I think it was a few months. I'm pretty sure it was a few months.
Okay. So you've been through these situations. You've been in it for a few months. You're not getting support. What next?
So ultimately I had to, kind of create my own path. And I say that because when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And as leaders, sometimes we can't ever tell our people that we can't help them prioritize. Everything is not a priority, period. And so what I had to do was prioritize my work on my own and think about what are the things that I can do right now that me and this other person can help pull together, and what's an immediate need to the business. And we had a lot of people waiting on our deliverable, which was the brand strategy and marketing plan for sports sponsorships, for messaging, for other marketing plans. There were just a lot of people depending on us to get that done. So that became number one priority. The other stuff, like the new measurement that we were implementing, didn't take a back seat because we had vendors doing that work. And so you have an SOW with timelines in it that you have to abide by. We had to still do that work, but thankfully that particular vendor was extremely understanding of what was going on. And they brought in reinforcements of like, hey, we can do this if you can do this. So they were helping. And they also extended the timeline for us a bit. And then some of the other work, I just said, we're going to pause. Like we are just not going to move forward with this work until I can hire a contractor. And then that contractor can come in and pick up that body of work. It ultimately all seemed to work out for the better. It did not come without. I failed. I failed on the HR front. I probably failed in the conversation that I had with my leader, allowing that to be her position on how I was feeling. I probably should have continued that conversation, but I shut down. I probably failed in a lot of my interactions with people during that time at work because I was so incredibly stressed. But what it did help was to shape how I led going forward. Mm-hmm. Because every HR nightmare that you could probably think of came in that first formal leadership role. It was like a crash course.
No kidding. And, I hear you, because I think we have similar personalities and that we have high expectations of ourselves.
Yeah.
And it feels like a failure, but then I'm also looking at it through my lens as an outsider saying you were put in an impossible situation. So, stress, no support, no tools, no training. How were you supposed to possibly not fail? Like who, you know what I mean? Like maybe 1% of a person, somebody in the population could manage that and navigate it. Yeah. So just to close the loop on this before we get to lessons learned, so you feel like you failed, but what happened? Did you eventually end up being able to hire people? Did you stay in that role? Did you go somewhere else? How does that possibly end up in anything good except for lessons learned for future leadership roles?
The silver lining was that I was able to hire every single person on that team.
Oh, that is nice.
Which is nice. And I was able to find the most incredible humans to come and help me lead that team. I don't know how I did it. I will tell you there was a piece of advice from our HR person. She was our HR business partner. So when I had all these open roles to hire for, she and I met and she's like, all right, how are we going to tackle this? And she was like, what type of person are you looking for these roles? And I was like, people like me. And she was like, no, time out, Stacy, time out. I loved her so much because she was a straight shooter, and she just was like, that's not, she was like, you don't want 3 more people like you. She was like, that's why? Because you have the same perspectives, the same experiences, so she helped me with that.
I love that, because at least you knew that. I hired people that were like me and I didn't even realize I was doing it. So at least you got called out on it.
Yes. She was like, no, that's not what you need to do. So I hired people that had different backgrounds, different perspectives, different age groups, different life experiences. So we labeled ourselves what we called the BAWs, which was badass women. And we had a little group text going on, and, we still, from time to time, even to this day, we still will sometimes check in with one another, but we were each other's support. Everybody appreciated what everybody brought to the table. It really didn't feel like there was a hierarchy on the team. Like I said, these people helped me lead this team. We all led this team in different ways. And it ultimately ended up being a really, really good thing. So what is it? Without struggle, there is no progress. So, honey, we got all the struggle in the world.
You had a lot of struggle, a lot of progress.
Yeah.
So speaking of progress, what did you learn from that? What are the many lessons that you've learned? I mean, obviously there's the hiring one. Don't hire people just like you. That's an easy one. But what did you learn through that? Because that's a tough time to look back and find silver linings in.
Yeah. The first thing was learnings about myself, in that, we were a health insurance company. We were not curing cancer. We were not ER trauma surgeons. The work is the work, and it's always going to be there. And I will never, ever, ever, ever again put my physical or mental well-being on the line. I won't. I don't want to work for people that expect that of me. So that was an expectation or a boundary that I set for myself, because there's a quote that I've seen several times, and it says, when you show up to work and you only have 40% to give, you've given 100%. And that's huge, because I think so many of us beat ourselves up thinking we have to show up and give 150% every day. And it's like, what's the other part of your life going to get?
Mm-hmm.
People have kids, they have family members that they're taking care of. They have dogs. My dog is my child.
Nugget needs your attention. He's a kid. Pets require a lot of work.
Yes. And then you have yourself, because your job is not who you are. It's a part of your life. And I think when we don't recognize that, we become extremely resentful. And that resentment manifests itself in your interactions with your coworkers, in your interactions with your families. We have to start looking at our jobs as being just a part of our life, and all of these different pieces of the pie that we call our life. It's just a slice of the pie. So that was a lesson I learned for myself.
I love what you said about 100%, right? I mean, we are only 100%. We can't give, if we give 100% at work, what is left for everything that we truly care about more, hopefully, than work? Well, if you were looking back at it with your, what you've been through, and I know you can't do anything differently, so I kind of hate the question I'm about to ask, but I'm curious. I'm going to ask it. Knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I'll probably start looking for another job.
But you didn't have any energy to go look for a job. But
I didn't. I have a lot of lessons learned now of how to lead people that have much more experience than I do. Because just because somebody reports directly to you doesn't make that's the only leadership. Right now in my role now, I lead people from all across the organization, and they are staff VPs and senior directors and, even VPs. I have to lead them in a function and practice of getting them to understand what's important, where we need to go next. And I think that I would have looked at that leadership role differently, because I automatically looked at it as what's on paper. Mm-hmm. They got 15 years experience to my 8. They got 20 years experience to my 8. And someone said to me during that time, because of course I'm like, I got total imposter syndrome. They were like, you're a leader, and leaders don't have to have the very deep technical capabilities to lead a team. You have to have leadership qualities. And obviously they thought you had the leadership qualities to lead this team in the direction that it needed to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've had to lead people with more experience, and I didn't have any experience in what I was getting involved in. But yeah, you don't need to have it. And it is letting people show their experience, right? Be the subject matter experts, bringing the best out of them. But it is a tough situation to be in, I think, on top of the years of experience, but them being peers.
Yeah.
Right. So you were selected being, okay, Stacy, you're going to, there's just there can be some discomfort there. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, I know it's made you a better leader. So what did you take out of that now that you lead, whether informally, formally, across the organization? What would you say you've learned that you've taken into your own leadership? Is it that boundary setting? Like you're not going to give it all to, a job, or is there something else?
I'm a big believer in everything happens the way it's supposed to. And that experience really set me up to help lead during COVID. And, everybody experienced COVID in a different way, because by the time COVID hit, I had that great team that I was able to hire. I had them all set up and running. And everybody experienced it differently, in that some folks on my team thrived being at home. We DoorDashed food every day. They were happy about that. And then I had some folks on the team who felt really isolated. I had some people on the team. I had one person on the team that just did not do well. She was very much an extrovert. And when COVID hit, she was like, what do I do now? And so, we still joke about, she used to take her dog on like 4 walks a day, like 45-minute walks.
I needed to get out into the world.
see that there are other people that exist.
And so it really made me hone in on, when people take care of themselves, they're way more productive at work. And I push my teams to show up in whatever capacity that means for them on any given day, because the world itself is just a heavy place. We have a ton of things going on at any given moment outside of the walls of our home, but also inside our home. And leaders who constantly push that, the work has to get done. And, sometimes I'll see where people are like, oh, I've got to go have a procedure, but I'll be back online this afternoon. Absolutely not. Do not. What do you mean? Or they'll be on PTO and they show up for a call and it's like, please hang up the phone right now. It has made me a person that totally believes in, if you show up and you only have 40% to give, you've given me your 100%. And in the long run, I'm going to get more out of you than I would if I was to push you. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just I allow people to be human at work. I'm empathetic and understanding of their situations. And I 100% believe in, if you are not okay as a person mentally and physically, you're not going to be okay as an employee. And so that comes first.
So if you had to give other leaders advice, and we'll say for this, a situation may be that you were in, right? First time leader, no support, no training, and have HR nightmares on your hand. What advice would you give them? And it could be that specific, or you could give it as just maybe for first time leaders. What advice would you give them?
Well, the first piece of advice I always give folks that come to me, and I get a lot of people that say, I want to be a manager. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, first rule of thumb, take the word manager out of your vocabulary. Because if you want to be a manager, then you need to be an individual contributor and manage your body of work. A leader is someone different. A leader is someone that is able to put themselves out there and push and lead their team in the right direction, but also let them shine. So that's number one. You if you're saying you want to be a manager, you really don't want to be a leader. So you need to figure out the difference in the two. The second thing I would tell people is you don't have to give up your humanity to be a leader. So many people feel like if they're going to get ahead or get to the next big thing or get a promotion, that they've got to just not be human and they have to just be this robot. And and anybody that knows me, like professionally, personally, they will tell you I am the same all the time.
My favorite people. Those are my favorite people because I can't handle a front. And we see a lot of that in corporate America, right? So they're one way in a meeting with your boss. And then they're one way in a meeting with their directs, right? Completely different personalities. Please don't do that. So I love that about you, Stacy.
Thank you. There is a difference between being authentic and being your true authentic self and being unprofessional. I'm not telling you to be unprofessional. I'm telling you that if you show up, you're a good human, you do righteous work, all that other stuff just comes naturally. When it doesn't come naturally, that's when you show up. I call it running for president. When you run for president and you're who everybody wants you to be, and you get where you want to go, you're usually tearing people down in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that you said that authentic does not need to mean unprofessional, because I think a lot of like the authentic word or vulnerable, right? That word gets thrown around a lot. And like, because you're vulnerable, people think you need to like word vomit all your deepest, darkest secrets on people. And that's not it, right? It's just being human. It's because you're going to be uncomfortable in a situation or two or 400 in leadership. And so the more that you can just lean into that and admit it, the better.
Yeah, it has really helped me in my role now because this was a new concept to this organization, a new structure and practice. There are 105,000 employees at this company, and I had to lead us through this new way of thinking. And my approach was shit is going to be sticky all the time. It's going to be messy. We're not going to get it right. Appreciate your grace. That is the biggest thing I can ask for folks right now is grace and keeping this process fluid. So that is a way you show up and be vulnerable in the workspace, is not showing up like you got everything figured out, letting people know I have it figured out. And, cut me some slack here. We figured it out together.
Yeah. No one has it figured out. And if they say they have it figured out, they are lying. They're big fat liars. I'm sorry. We're all just stumbling about.
Did you say stumbling about?
Fumbling, stumbling, all of it. I'd be curious if someone has it all together. Let me know. Maybe it's just me.
Let me know too.
Well, Stacy, before we close out, is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with? I definitely want to mention you have a TEDx talk that you did that was wonderful that I'm going to link up in the show notes. So please go check out Stacy's TED talk. But anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
No, I'm glad you mentioned the TEDx because I talk about authenticity in there. And I think in any area of your life, if you lead formally or informally, you got to know who you are first. You can't, Brene Brown, she's got a show, Atlas of the Heart. It's on HBO or Max now, I think it's called. And she says, if we are not connected to ourselves, it is impossible for us to make connections with others. And I think a way that you connect with yourself is figuring out who you are at the core of your being. And I talk about that in my TEDx. And that's how you're able to show up authentically with folks and make those connections with them. So,
yeah, I love that. And I think just one thing I want to pile on there is like being very self-aware of yourself and how you want to be, how you want to show up, and then also knowing who you are under stress. Because I think there's situations that heighten maybe like something that's really good in your personality, but it becomes, excessive whenever, at least it did for me, whenever we're under extreme stress. But is knowing that about yourself, like, okay, I need to check out what's going on. I'm not the self I want to be, and I'm not the self I normally am. And, so I'll link that up in the show notes. I think it's an important one for people to watch.
Great. Thank you.
Stacy, thank you so much for being really honest in this conversation. And I know to help other leaders, hopefully no one else is going through the complete dumpster fire you went through, but I wouldn't doubt if they were. Best leadership.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Growing Through It. I'm Jen Arnold, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If today's story sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with your fellow leaders. And remember, each episode comes with a nugget of wisdom that we expand on in our newsletter. So if you're eager to put these insights into action, head over to our website at growthsignals.co and sign up for exclusive content that'll give you an edge in your leadership journey. Keep growing, and I'll connect with you again soon in our next episode. Until then, take the lessons learned and lead authentically.